Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to be kicking off this interview series, and I have a friend of ours, Nick Pineault, here, and we're going to talk about a book that he has recently launched and just get some major insight because he is known as the healthy food nerd, and we love that because he knows so much about healthy eating. So we're going to get quite a bit of information on him about the right foods that we should be eating, things that we need to stay away from. So we're pumped about this. So Nick, thank you so much for your time. This is awesome.
Thanks for having me, Mandy. I appreciate it.
Good. Well, I loved your book, and when did you guys release your book? It's been a couple of months now?
Yeah, it's been since the end of May. Basically, it's been released to the public, but yeah, the response has been overwhelming. We now have about 20,000 buyers so far, and the feedback is so amazing. We love it.
It is. I mean, and it's so filled with content, which I think is great. I mean, it's an amazing book that I continue to reference over and over again, which I think is really great. You have it broken down so nicely, and it's laid out really beautifully. So it's just a great resource for us. But you talk about a lot of things in here. Maybe we can just start by just talking about that healthy food progression. And I think a lot of our viewers and readers, we tend to, obviously we talk a lot about healthy kids and healthy kids eating. And I think that what we find is oftentimes that kids tend to eat like their parents, and that's who they model after as their parents. And,
Right.
and parents are still in that mindset that low fat is the best way to eat. And I think you nipped that obviously pretty quickly in the book. So if we talk a little bit about the whole low fat.
Yeah, it's kind of complicated. I'll try to distill it down to just a few key points. Basically, I don't know. It's all about the government advice based on some studies in the 50s that basically tried to demonize saturated fats and even all fats for that matter in the 1950s because basically what was happening, the government did some studies and people were starting to get fatter, unfortunately, and heart attacks and cholesterol, diabetes, all these diseases were starting to appear. And they tried to, I don't know, it's a big political thing because on one side you had the companies who wanted to sell more grains that had a big financial tie in the government recommending people eat less fat and more grains. So there's some financial side to it. But since the 50s, since then, researchers have been bashing fat again and again. But the fact is, when you just look in an evolutionary perspective, we used to eat about 50 to 70% fat, and that's back even in the 1800s. And in those days, diabetes was nowhere to be found. People, I mean, there were fat people around, of course, people who ate too much, but there was probably the baker or people were exposed to all those carbs, right?
Yeah.
You don't picture an ancient time with all people obese like these days. It's pretty bad. It's like a third of the population. So basically, that's kind of a false idea that's been around that all fats are bad, when in fact, there's a lot of good fats around. And I don't know if you want to talk about this, what kind of fats people should eat. So basically,
Love that.
let's talk about the fats that are bad for you. Of course, trans fats, nowadays we know that they're bad, but back in the 1950s, researchers were already finding that maybe they're bad, but it took about 60 years before finally they're labeled. So it's pretty bad because now we know eating only a few grams can increase your heart attack possibility by a lot. So that's pretty sad that it took all this time. So just something to keep in mind. Just shows you how much, I don't know, the advice now could be considered dangerous in a couple of years from now.
You bet.
So basically, then you've got saturated fats from animals, and that's very one controversial advice. But to me, the fact that we used to eat this kind of fat, animal fat coming from healthy animals, again, since the beginning of time, just shows you that it's probably good for you. And compare that to polyunsaturated fats from vegetable oil, for example. A lot of people use it and it's touted as healthy. But the fact is that it's a very fragile oil. So when you extract the oil from grains and it's exposed to heat, to air, and to oxygen, basically what happens is that they get damaged to some degree, and these fats are inflammatory. So I really don't recommend canola oil, corn oil, and all those vegetable oil.
Yes.
And an example of healthy fats I would recommend instead is coconut oil, which is now almost mainstream,
Yeah.
probably the healthiest fat around that you can cook with and even use in any meal.
That's great. And we love our coconut oil. And you give some really good examples of which types of coconut oils to buy too. And I think that's really
Right.
helpful as folks are navigating through the grocery store because there are a couple of different kinds you can purchase.
Yeah, two main kinds. The one thing with coconut oil, I mean, if you don't like coconut, the taste of it, some people think, damn, I can buy it. It's healthy, but I just don't like it.
Yeah.
But the fact is that coconut oil is pretty resilient when it comes to being exposed to heat because it's saturated fat. It's way more stable than those vegetable oils. So
Yes.
they're able to create what's called expeller pressed coconut oil. You can find it like companies like Tropical Traditions. You can find it on Amazon.com or almost any online website. And basically, it's coconut oil that's been deodorized. So basically,
Okay.
you get all the benefits or almost all the benefits without the taste. So, and if you like the coconut oil, which I do, just buy the virgin kind. That's pretty standard, organic if possible.
Yeah.
And if it's and just as a side note, I've heard lately that people thought one customer told me I've just thrown away my solid coconut oil because I've heard that the solid kind is bad, but yeah, that's pretty weird.
Really?
I don't know where that comes from,
Yeah.
but the solid kind is only coconut oil which has been exposed to temperatures that are basically under 20 degrees. So it becomes liquid over 20 degrees Celsius.
Gotcha.
So just keep that in mind. It can be either solid or liquid. It's solid.
Or liquid.
Yeah.
That's neat. Okay, great. Gosh, we love coconut oil in our house. And it would take a little bit of time to get adjusted to, but now we've completely acquired a taste for it and seem to really like it. So I think that's a great tip and a good takeaway. You know, it's interesting talking about about saturated fats and just about fats in general, because I do think, I mean, you had mentioned at one point in one of your emails, I believe, that most adults don't even get 3 servings of vegetables a day.
Right.
And that's pretty wild. I mean, I think that's pretty eye-opening, and I'm sure kids are probably struggling with the same thing too. And it seems like so many times they're focusing on low fat and low calorie, so we're eating a little bit more for convenience than we are for nutrients.
Right.
And it's a real shame. And do you think that's more just because just lack of knowledge and just maybe not understanding or just that everybody's just too busy?
Oh, wow. It's it's a huge problem. Basically, it's a combination of all these really lifestyle factors and everything. We're actually working on a new product just as a scoop, and it will be on to help those people who don't have time to cook and to eat healthy, and just show them that it's very possible to do it on only a couple minutes a day. But it all comes down to a mix of education. Some people don't even know what a vitamin is.
Yeah.
So how do you expect them to make the right choices? I mean, of course, it happens less and less often. So there's a big movement of healthy eating, but a lot of people don't have the knowledge necessary. And then you've got people that know they should be eating right, but they just have life that gets in the way. And that's very normal. I mean, I don't even have kids, and sometimes we just, oh my God, we're overwhelmed with work and everything. I can't even imagine what it's like with kids and with people. We're entrepreneurs. Me and my wife and business partner Jen, and we still don't have time sometimes. So I really understand what it's like, and it all comes down to planning.
It does.
Your food and going to the grocery store with a plan and having your meals planned in advance. So that's really one big takeaway that people need to understand. If you don't plan, you're basically planning to fail, because you'll just come home. Like every night, it's too late. You check your fridge. You're exhausted, and you realize you only got ketchup and mayo.
Yeah.
What do you do with those? I mean, you don't have anything.
Yeah.
And then you have the takeaway, the takeout restaurant, or the fast food restaurant, and that's when you just choose to go with the convenience. Of course,
it's so
you have
true.
better things to do.
You know, that's everything that we focus on at Healthy Kids Inc. And we really show those busy families how to adopt that healthy eating lifestyle. And you nailed it. I mean, that it really is all about that planning. And it does take a little bit of effort. And I know that parents are so busy, but even just that 1 hour on the weekend, if they can just get their meals organized and get some of that heavy hitting out of the way, it just makes it so much easier during the weeknight.
Right.
And you know, in our case, I mean, at least in our family, we don't buy a whole lot of extras. I mean, our refrigerator is pretty much, I mean, it's just what we need. The freezer is pretty bare, the pantry,
Right.
I mean, we just buy what we need, and that works really well for us. But we have to plan it all out, or just like you say, I'm going to be like, oh man, I don't have anything to eat for dinner.
Yeah.
So that planning is just crucial, I think. And I think that's that one piece a lot of parents are missing.
Totally agree. And the one thing that's really difficult is that if right now you're listening to this and you never plan anything,
Yeah.
expect a learning curve. And yes, it will not be merry, it will be hard, and you will spend probably a couple hours on the first time you come around and try to get organized. It will be messy.
Yes.
You'll do mistakes and you'll forget this and that. You go to a grocery store, it takes you five times more hours to go to
Yeah.
the grocery store, and you probably get discouraged pretty fast. But the second time and third time you do that, you realize that it gives you more time during the week, because you'll be
Oh my
coming
gosh.
home and, okay, I know what to cook. I have, guess what? All the ingredients are there available in the pantry and
Yes.
fridge. That's pretty amazing. That's
Yeah.
magical. You just cook
It is.
the thing, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, you're done. Everyone is happy at the table, because you don't try to improvise something that you're gonna screw up, a recipe
Yes.
that you might screw up or anything. And I'm sure a lot of parents have really picky eaters, so that's probably a huge problem as well. So you plan something that people are gonna like around the table, but at the same time, it's healthy, and that's really the one thing you want to do for your family.
You are exactly right. And I love that you talk about picky eaters, because you also talk about that in your book as well. And you brought up something really cool, because we have a lot of picky eaters, obviously, amongst our Healthy Kids community, and picky eaters always comes up. And I think it's really cool because you talk about retraining your taste buds.
Right.
And that's a cool concept, because I think that what happens oftentimes is, parents might have a picky eater and they just then kind of coddle that and just accept it and work around it until they become adults. And then that picky eater tendency just continues forever.
Yeah.
And they don't really try to work around it. And I know, because now I had a picky eater husband who started out as that picky eater child and just never really worked out of it. So I think that it's really cool that you said that you really can retrain your taste buds.
Oh yeah, you can definitely. I mean, I was reading a study lately about taste buds being numbed or desensitized by sugar. So when you eat sugar again and again, it seems that everything becomes tastes less sugary, and that's a fact. I mean, I remember back in the days when I was a child. Don't expect me to find fruit pleasant, because I was eating cakes and stuff like that at basically at dinner and at lunch. So I preferred those because they were really high in sugar. Nowadays, I can't even manage those. They're just too sugary for me.
Yes.
And that's really a question of reducing your sugar intake.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, you probably want to try to, introduce certain foods to your family, but do it in a way that for kids. I know a lot of people like Isabel de Los Rios, who has a really amazing community. I know she works with her kids. Basically, of course, when you start introducing at really very young age, that's ideal. But even if they're picky eaters, you can bring them back a little bit on the healthy side. And for example, you might do a fruit smoothie, but include a lot of greens in there or a lot of veggies. And you don't have to mention to them like, oh, I've put some broccoli in your shake, or just don't say it, and they will eventually don't even care about it because it's good. So it's all about that first taste with kids. I think if they taste it once and they don't like it, you're probably you're probably a little bit in trouble. So you try to just have a good experience at first, and even hide veggies where you can in sauces or in other things like that, where you can hide veggies, and they don't even know the nutrients are there, but they're still happy about the recipe.
So cool. So true. And I know with my kids, I mean, they just now love experimenting with new foods. And I think that's really fun. And it's taken a little while to get to that point.
Yeah.
But now it's become an exciting thing for them. And everybody has to try a bite of something. And then they're usually surprised when they like it. And it's funny with picky eaters, because I do a lot of just demonstrations with parents and kids, and where we'll do smoothie demonstrations, or we'll do, I recently did one with spaghetti squash. and I
Yeah.
demoed this in front of at a farmer's market, and it was spaghetti squash, and we used all local tomatoes and local grass-fed beef for the sauce on top of it. And the
Yeah.
parents and the kids were just so excited about it. I mean, they had never tried spaghetti squash, didn't really quite know how to use it, but the kids was the most exciting part, to watch them and just to be able to taste test something and to like it and come back for more. I mean, it's really exciting.
Right.
So it's fun to be able to experiment with new foods. You just have to get them over the hump sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, for me, I used to be a pretty standard cook. Now
Hmm.
Jen and I cook every day, basically. So I'm pretty experienced now, and I can probably improvise with any three ingredients you
Yes.
give me. But I mean, back in the days, I know the big concern for most people is that they tell me I'm not a cook, I'm not a good cook,
Right.
and of course you have that thought, oh, what if it doesn't taste good? And people, I mean, it's pretty hard on your confidence when you do
Oh,
something that doesn't taste good.
oh my gosh, it's the
It's
worst.
hurtful. Yeah, and you spent 30 minutes, 1 hour, or maybe
Yeah,
more if you're not that experienced in the kitchen and people don't like it.
you're
Duh. So
right.
you're probably, the next time around, I'm gonna order some Chinese food and they're gonna love it, right? But
Yeah,
just don't get discouraged.
yeah.
Eventually, you'll get better at it. And the one thing is that if you if you try it for yourself, for example, if you go to demonstrations or just take a small class, or
Hmm.
all those farmer markets often have people that can give you just general advice, and
Yes.
that's really what can give you the confidence. For example, spaghetti squash.
Yeah.
I hadn't tried it, and Jen was, oh, I don't know, maybe it's not that good, and that's all right because we had never tried it before. But
Hmm.
once we tried it, it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, we're gonna use it again. And of
Yes.
course, regular pasta, we love it. Jen
Yes.
especially, she loves pasta, but spaghetti squash, good alternative from
It
time to
is.
time.
It is so true. Hey, so I'm just curious, when if you, do you eat any type of gluten-free pasta then? Do you?
Usually I try to do that, but sometimes we just have regular wheat or at least whole wheat. But
Oh yeah.
gluten, we often eat rice noodles more
Oh
often than
yeah.
not because we really like Thai food, and we do some soups with them, and basically any saute, and
Hmm.
a lot of the times that's really rice noodles we eat.
I like the rice noodles too, and I like the gluten-free pasta as well. I mean,
Yeah,
they both have good tastes, and the family seems to have adjusted to that. That's cool.
right.
So talk a little bit about breads too, because that always comes up, and it's always a hot topic with parents because they have a really hard time. I mean, obviously, some families might be gluten free or paleo and just stay away from the breads, but for some other
Yeah,
parents, they're just not ready for that. So, what
yeah.
breads do you recommend?
It all depends on what you want. I mean, some people are just stuck on the white bread,
Mm-hmm.
or even, I mean, if you consider brown bread healthy, it's probably because you haven't read the label. Because oftentimes, I mean, it all comes down to how refined the grains are.
Mm-hmm.
So brown bread, most brown breads are in fact more refined than white breads
Mm-hmm.
in general. When you look at just at an average at a grocery store. So you want the grains to be whole. That's the one thing. So the first step I would recommend is stick with whole grains as much as possible. So
Okay.
try to find whole wheat and any other grains in there. If you want to go gluten free, that's one thing I recommend. A lot of people these days feel better off gluten, even people who aren't diagnosed with any intolerances per
Mm-hmm.
se,
Mm-hmm.
but just feel better. So if you want to go gluten free, choose gluten grains. And one bread that's basically the king of them all is sprouted grain bread.
That's what I
So
love.
that's really the one kind I love.
Me too.
Jen doesn't like it, and that's all
Really?
right. I mean,
Yeah,
some people don't like that taste. That's really an acquired taste.
it is.
But if you get your kids, I don't know, if you only have that kind of bread in the house, that's really a good start. Because I mean, if kids want bread, it's gonna be that bread.
Yes,
You can have strict rules on this, and eventually if they really want bread, they will eat it
they
and they
will.
will get used to it. That's I really think that taste is something that oftentimes isn't a habit more than
I think you're
really a
right.
taste that you're born with.
You are right. I think our kids usually find that if it's toasted, they seem to do better with the sprouted bread, but they do it, and
Okay.
that's good. That makes us feel
Yeah.
that makes us feel good.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, so talk a little bit about drinks for us too, because yeah, I'm coming off the heels of doing some sugary drink presentations in some of the schools, and it's
Right.
always fun and eye opening for me to see the kids. I usually line up all of the worst drinks and have them to pick which one has the most sugar, and we talk about sugar and all that fun stuff. But it's always, kids love to just talk about drinking sugary drinks. And naturally, we're trying to get them away from them. But will you talk about maybe some of the healthy drinks that you recommend for kids? What should they be drinking?
Sure. One thing I'd recommend, I mean, first of all, what I don't recommend, because I think that's very controversial advice. I see parents giving, those 100% pure juices
Mm-hmm.
to their kids, and they really mean well. I mean, of course, it's 100% juice. You look at the label, and then you're like, oh, is there any added sugar in there? And there is not.
Yeah.
But the thing is that sugar in its processed form is not very different than sugar from fruits. Sugar from fruits contains fructose, glucose, and a mix of sucrose, which is basically processed sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at processed sugar, it's 100% sucrose. In the end, it all comes down to the quantity inside your body. When you have too much sugar, it basically wreaks havoc in your entire system. Your health is really affected by sugar on all levels. And when it comes to also, it's really fattening. It's really bad for your digestive system. Almost every part of your body is affected negatively.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing I say is that if your juice is 100%, but it's pasteurized, you basically have no nutrition and 100% sugar in there. It's basically, yes, it's in the form of fruit, but you don't have any fiber or anything around that sugar to support it. For example, 1 cup of orange juice contains as much sugar as 3 large oranges.
Yeah.
So that's very different. Try eating 3 large oranges and giving that to a kid. The
Yeah.
kid will probably won't eat for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But 1 cup of orange juice just lasts for 3 seconds, and then he asks for a second and a third.
That's
So you
exactly
end
right.
up consuming a lot of sugar without having that appetite curbed at all. So that's one problem. So really, all kind of juices, I'd recommend against that. Of course, if your kids right now are drinking a lot of juice, they might freak out if you just
Yeah.
remove everything. Maybe just cut it with water
Yes.
or reduce consumption. But as far as healthy drinks go, I'd say try to do something that's really awesome is using an alternative sweetener like stevia, and using basically homemade iced tea or herbal tea if
That's
you don't want
good.
any caffeine in there. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that's refreshing. You can
I
put
like
fruits
that.
in there. It feels like a fruit punch
Mm-hmm.
to kids, but of course you don't have a lot of sugar in there, and that's really reducing sugar consumption is a good thing. And coconut water is also something that a lot of kids will love. A little bit of sugar or even stevia in there can be good for them, just to help them get accustomed to the taste. But aside from that, you try to stick with water as much
Mm-hmm.
as possible, and that's really hard once kids are really hooked up on sugar, because remember that they're really smaller than us. So basically, if you drink 1 cup of orange juice and you give the same quantity to a kid, it's
Mm-hmm.
basically drinking yourself 2 liters of
Oh my
orange juice. So
gosh.
that just has more impact on their health as well.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. And aside from the juices, just the fad that kids think about drinking energy drinks and
Right.
drinking Mountain Dew. I mean, it's a scary thing to think of how much sugar these kids are drinking. And then
Yeah,
the
that's a lot.
diet drinks on top of that. And even at the kids, when I go into the classrooms, even, first and second graders still already know about diet drinks and sometimes drink them. And they're following the suit of the parents, which
Yeah.
naturally is worse than even drinking the real soda.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I mean, our artificial sweeteners, just as far as study goes, I don't know. I'm more interested in the science, not really my opinion about whether it's natural. It's not. Of course, I like natural better, but when it comes down to science, the studies show that artificial sweeteners actually spike your blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not really safe for anyone trying to reduce their blood sugar spike, diabetes, and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They have some effect on your gut flora as well. Just they're as dangerous as sugar, if not more. and we don't have a long-term data to tell that they're safe. So that's really why I advise against Planta or aspartame, sucralose, saccharin, any of those, really.
That's good. That's really good feedback and good advice. Will you talk a little bit about the pasteurizing of? I want to talk about milk, if you don't mind, just for a moment.
Sure.
About raw milk, organic milk. What do you recommend?
If you have access to raw milk, I mean, it's really a personal choice, but I really recommend it just because it's, to me, first, it's way healthier when it comes down to pure on a pure nutritional standpoint. And the second part is really when it comes to allergies and intolerance, because a lot of people, kids these days, unfortunately, their immune system are really more affected by allergens, and it's part of the problem is really what we eat, our environment, water quality, and everything. But a part of it is because their parents have had more allergies than their parents, and vice versa. So it's just this come down to allergies are going to come really up in the next years, unfortunately. But a lot of people are all kinds of symptoms from milk intolerance and don't even know about it. So bad digestion, mucus buildup, headaches, and everything. They realize once they go off pasteurized dairy that they feel way better. So that's one thing. First of all, that's one test you wanna do.
Good.
And a lot of people who get off pasteurized dairy can tolerate raw dairy just fine, and it's partially because raw dairy just is way more digestible because you don't have that pasteurization process which destroys all the probiotics, enzymes, and everything that was contained originally in the milk that's made in nature this way to be for the humankind to be able to digest it is gone. So it's way harder to digest, and it's not 100% thing. I'm not saying that you should get off all milk, but do try raw milk if you have access to it and it's legal in your state or country. But also one thing is that I don't really I don't really like the milk quality in the US generally. I read about a lot of stuff, hormones, GMO hormones, RBST in there. It's widespread and it's pretty scary as far as the studies goes. You have a lot of contaminants in there. Pesticides contaminants are on the rise. So it's just a huge industry. And when you have this huge industry, you just have more and more contamination. Just makes me a little bit worried about the health impacts of that. So that's why I'd recommend sticking to organic milk if you can afford it.
Of course. And really, I mean, I don't think the organic milk is too terribly much more expensive. I mean, we're talking, $4 or so for a half gallon of milk. So I think it certainly is worth it. That's good advice. That's good. Okay, one more question, because you talked about the pesticides. So what do you think? I mean, obviously, the choice of buying organic or local produce. And what prompts me to even ask that is because one thing that you had written that really just kind of struck me was that, an average apple will sit on the grocery store shelf for a year. And so as it sits, it's going to lose its nutrients. And even if it's an organic apple, it loses its nutrients. I mean, so obviously buying local might be more advantageous.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's one thing, again, when organic just came, these days it's everywhere, right? But we forget about the really simple principles is that fresh food is healthier. For example, vitamin C, or if you cut an orange in half, a couple minutes and the vitamin C is starting to just go away because it's very, very volatile when mixed with oxygen. And it's the case with a lot of foods. So when, for example, nuts, when they just sit on a supermarket shelf for a year, all the healthy fats eventually get oxidized, so they're way less absorbable, and eventually they become inflammatory and not as good for you. So you want fresh produce and fresh meats and fresh anything more than organic. And that's the one thing. Of course, organic is a certification that tells you have less pesticides in there and you have less of the bad stuff. But a lot of farmers can't even afford being organic because it's a certification and you have to pay a lot of money to have it, and you have inspectors coming in and everything. So you have a lot of strict rules to follow. So non-organic is not necessarily full of pesticides. It's not as simple as that. So if you find local farmers, they will, and you meet them in person. So a local farmers market is really eye-opening, because you talk to people one-on-one like it used to be back in the days. It's that relationship with people who grow your food, that confidence that you can have in your farmer who tells you, look, I have this small farm, I'm not organic, but
Right.
I don't use any of those chemicals. It's probably even better than any organic stuff you're going to find at the supermarket, and that's going to be 6 months, 1 year old, because you'll get way more nutrients and you won't get any of the bad stuff. So really finding local, to me, is way more important than organic.
That's really, really good. I actually have a local person that I buy all of our chicken and eggs from, and same thing. She says, it's so expensive for them to buy the organic grain to feed the chickens. So they but they're raised with love, and that's great. And they get to roam all day, and they do get to eat on the grass and the bugs, and that's great. So I feel comfortable knowing that I'm getting it from them.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Very much. Okay, this is great. Nick, thank you so much. Is there any other advice that you might have for folks who are watching? Anything else that you'd like to share?
The one thing I think, to me, I'm really, people consider me amongst my friends like really a health freak sometimes, because and it's not necessarily a bad thing to say. I accept the term, but because I like healthy foods, I talk about health and everything, but then they see me having a beer and they're like, "Oh, you're taking that? Oh my God!" You don't have to freak out about all this healthy eating stuff.
Yeah.
Remember, so the one thing I'm trying to say here is that you need to remember why you're doing this, and it's to be healthy, but also be happy about your life. So if you're freaking out about every single food and, oh, is there poison in my water, in my tap water, and then in bottled water it's even worse, and my fruits are bad, my veggies are bad, eventually it's going to wear you out, and you're going to just stop everything altogether. So take baby steps, like you said. Baby steps are the way to go. And remember that if you do the right thing and you eat the right things 80% of the time, you're going to have 80% of the results and 80% of the perfect health you're trying to achieve. And there's no such thing as a perfect diet or being perfect all the time. If you're listening to this, you're already doing a huge step towards your health. So the only fact that you're getting informed is still very good. And now try new things and just build every week one new thing you want to work on, and eventually you'll get there. And it's a lifelong learning, really.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And it does need to be that progression, because it's overwhelming. It's just way too much of an adjustment to make. I think it's safe to say that, healthy eating happens daily, not in a day, is a good way to put it. And so I think you're right. Just baby steps. Every time you go to the grocery store, think of what can you trade up? What can you exchange this week for something a little bit healthier? And then over the course of week after week after week, wow, think about how much you're going to transform, your house. And you're going to feel so much better and have so much more energy and just be happier. It's definitely well worth it.
Yeah, totally agree.
Great.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this was so good. So I'm going to put a link to your book, The Truth About Fat-Burning Foods. It was awesome. Thank you so much. It really, again, I reference it all the time. So I can't thank you enough for all the time and effort that you put into it. It definitely is helping people, changing lives. It's really important.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Nick.
If you want more healthy dinners for your family, check out Healthy Kids Inc., the only online meal planner that shows busy parents what to cook, how to cook it, and how to get your kids to eat it. Relief for the busy family is just a click away. Learn more about Healthy Kids Inc. online.